we have gone in detail about all the various stages. But if you try to see that the 8 stages are dealing with certain aspects or characteristics that one develops as one goes, that is the concept of the development of ego. And ego in different stages develops in different ways. And we try to see that when a child is small, he has trust versus mistrust. If people believe in him, he becomes trustworthy. If there are certain mistrustful things happening in his life, he becomes mistrustful of the world. Then we talked about the early childhood where he tries to develop the initiative versus guilt. If he is encouraged, he becomes much more initiative. If he said he's wrong, you're in the wrong, he tries to develop the guilt aspect. And later in the middle childhood, there is this concept of development where if he tries to put in some work, industry is there, he's appreciated, he tries to be industry. That is, he tries to be more, he'll be in the more pursuit of work, tries to be appreciated. And if not, if he is somewhat curtailed, he's reprimanded, he's scolded, he develops the inferiority complex. Here in this stage, he tries to develop what you call, he wants to affection or the praiseworthy, he wants to become praiseworthy. He wants people to appreciate him or praise him. At the age of 12 to 18 years, we find this identity versus role centricness, where he has the feeling that he has to be recognized as well as the confusion of what roles he has to perform. That is why in adolescence, there is lots of confusion because the society says there are certain roles, whereas the individual would like to have, try to promote his own identity. So this is a stage of conflict in adolescence. Later, Erik Erikson also talks about the stages of intimacy versus isolation, where when an adult tries to become intimate with other people, tries to develop relationships, get into the concepts of marriage, tries to get married, have children, have relationships with other people. And therefore, in this stage, he tries to find fulfillment. So here, he has the intimate relationships developing with other people. At the same time, if he is not successful in his relationships, he tries to be isolated. Later on, from the age of 40 to 65, there is this generativity versus stagnation, where people try to do the best of their lives by trying to be creative, that is generative, or trying to do something good in the world. At the same time, there is also sometimes stagnation because either some people feel that they are not properly perceived, they are not properly appreciated, that the circumstances are not helpful for them, and they become stagnated in their livelihood pursuits, or they do not put their efforts creatively. So also from 65 to death, there is ego integrity versus despair. Ego, when we talk about, we're talking two aspects, not that all individuals have this. Some people who are successful have one issue, they are the two ends of a spectrum. People may fall in between two. So these are the two major characteristics. Some people may have ego integrity, thinking they are happy with the world. They feel they have been successful in their lifespan. They feel they have done what they are worth. And at the same time, if people are not successful, they feel despaired. They are unhappy. They feel that their life was a worthless pursuit. So Erik Erikson was actually talking about these two ends of the spectrum where people may fall in between two. But generally, he wants to say that these issues are developing across the lifespan depending on the environmental stimuli. Therefore, whenever you see about the ego development, we talk about the lifespan development is mostly here based on the development of ego also. And this is a comprehensive theory in the sense it tries to bring in the social development of the individual and also the biological development of the individual and the overall how a person gradually tries to develop across his lifespan. So this is somewhat a complete aspect of a theory. At the same time, he gives the concept of maturity to it. That is, a mature organism, he tries to grow, and along with his growth, his personality is also developing. So here it is a complete sort of theory where he tries to bring in the different aspects of development. But the problem is, if you try to see all the 8 stages, we find here nearly 5 stages are dealing with what you call childhood. For example, the first stage to the 5th stage is from age 1 to 18 years. But whereas 6, 7, 8 stages deal with 19 to till death. So there has been a lot of criticism saying that there has been more focus on the childhood rather than the adulthood. This is one of the criticism. And also sometimes we see here that there are scope for individual differences. It is not that all people are having the trust issues and some people are not having mistrust issues. Likewise, all people need not be feel isolated, and some people may have all the intimate relationships. Or it's not that all people are completely happy with their generativity or creativity and all people are disappointed. There is scope for individuals also to be there across the spectrum, and therefore the individual differences, or there is a fact that the people may vary in their feeling about how they have been successful or not, or there is actually a whole spectrum between these two, the whole thing. So therefore, there is a criticism that Erik Erikson has not considered individual differences as a major aspect of this theory. Therefore, we have dealt with Freud's theory as well as the Erik Erikson's theory. Now, we'll go on for the next type of developmental theory, which talks about the educational development of a child. That is the learning capability. See, any individual tries to develop his understanding of the world, and this is known as learning. He tries to understand about his environment, as well about the circumstances in which he is placed, and also he tries to understand the world as such. And this is known as cognition. To cognize means to understand. The Piaget's theory is basically an educational psychologist. It is known as constructivism. Constructivism is the sense that whatever we see in the world, we try to imbibe it or try to develop in our own minds and build up what we call an understanding of the world. The Piaget's theory generally deals with all the children's educational development and why there exists this difference in mental abilities of different individuals. We also know that the children are less intellectually developed compared to the adults. Now, these differences come in the aspect of thinking. So, how a child thinks is different from how an adult thinks. Why does these differences arise? This is because the children, they are not completely matured. Along with biological maturation comes thinking abilities. Therefore, we also have the biological maturation as well as the environmental effects. Children who come from rich families or well-endowed families are able to be they are having more stimuli, they are able to get along or see more things, and therefore they have more chance of learning new things. Whereas children from poorer circumstances, they may not be exposed to many things. So this also has an effect on the learning ability of a child. So any person's growth or the learning ability actually depends on two things. One is biological maturation. That is how actually one person tries to grow, his aspects of genetics, hereditary. At the same time, there is also the influence of environmentalism or environmental factors. Generally, psychology talks about these two things in great detail. That is the heredity versus the environmental factors. An individual is the total sum of the effects of the environment as well as his biological features, biological factors. Now, actually, when we talk about the Piaget's theory, he's talking about how we understand the world, how a child understands the world, how he actually develops his learning. In this aspect, he talks about the schema. What is schema? Whenever we see many things in the world, we try to keep it in an understanding. We try to understand and we give it a particular, all this, whatever we perceive, we try to keep it in the brain in a particular way or order. How the order in which we try to understand the things or the mental setup where we have a clear idea of how we place the things in an order is known as a schema, a scheme-like thing where actually all the things what you see are placed in the brain. Now, this schema, whenever you learn a new thing, it comes, the new things adds to the already the information present in the brain, and a new sort of schema is developed, or new schema comes into existence. So whatever we learn about the world, it is always an assimilative process, in the sense that our schema are getting defined and refined every day. So new knowledge means whatever internal schema we have developed from our childhood are getting, what we call, with more knowledge, they are getting richer, and therefore the assimilation process or learning process is a continuous process. Piaget also talks about the accommodation process. Accommodation is something similar to assimilation, that we try to gain the knowledge. But accommodation also means sometimes there is variance of knowledge. It is not that we get to know the things which we have learned earlier. They may not be in the same pattern. Sometimes you understand things of a new nature, and therefore this brings a sort of dissonance. For example, a little child is there. Whenever he sees a fruit, say apple, he'll say, when he sees a pear or any other fruit, he says apple. But when he tries to grow up, he understands that all round objects need not be apples. So the schema that there is fruit is round actually has been changed. That is, now he understands that any fruit which is round may not be apple. It may be some other fruit like an orange or a pear or something else. So here he is trying to accommodate the new knowledge. That is, some variance is there, and he is trying to see that this new knowledge is incorporated without causing any disturbance or dissonance. Dissonance means whatever new knowledge is there, if it is similar to the previous, it is assimilated. If it is somewhat different, the person tries to accommodate it by understanding it varies in this manner, it is similar in this manner, and he tries to understand. Sometimes there is somewhat dissonance, or sometimes some sort of a problem, and this is known as disequilibrium. But that disequilibrium, by proper understanding or the smoothing of the, or what we call the schema is somewhat made easier, or he tries to replace the schema with this new understanding, and therefore the accommodation process occurs. So Piaget says that assimilation and accommodation are the two ways. That is, understanding the similarities as well as the dissimilarities. It is how we try to go on increasing our schema. And the more schema we learn about the world, the more refined the schema are, the more we try to integrate more schema. That is how the new knowledge is built. So Piaget is always, he wondered how the child would learn that knowledge. How a child would develop into an individual, a grown-up individual, where he is capable of more intellectual abilities. He talks about the intellectual development across the lifespan. So basically, he talks about 4 stages of the children's development. From 0 to 2 years is known as the sensory motor stage. And from 2 to 7 years, it is known as the pre-operational stage. And from 7 to 12 as concrete operational stage, and from 12 to adulthood, it is known as the formal operational stage. So these are the 4 stages. As you know, the sensory motor stage is the first stage, that is from 0 to 2 years, where the child tries to learn something about his environment by using his senses or motor actions. Here again, the children are not able to understand the world. They are trying to use their senses and the motor actions, and therefore, by using their hands, legs, and their body, they are able to adjust to the environment. They are trying to understand the environment. So here, the children are not able to understand the world, and they try to seek attention. We have from birth to 1 month simple reflex actions, where the child tries to use his hands and legs and tries to see that how the senses and actions are somehow, how they are coordinated. He tries to move his legs, hands, and tries to coordinate his actions along with his sense organs. Then comes the primary circulatory reaction stage, where he makes certain movements, and here from 1 to 4 months, he is able to repeat all his actions. For example, he learns the what you call thumb sucking. He tries to put in his thumb inside the mouth and tries to put it repeatedly. This is because he finds it pleasurable. Therefore, after say from 4 to 8 months, you will see the secondary circular reactions where he knows certain actions can be predictable. So this is a continuous stage of growth. He knows that certain actions will try to bring in. He cries so that his mother comes to him. So he knows the infant coos when he wants the attention of the other person. He makes certain sounds. Whereas later, from the month of 8 to 12 months, we find that there is hand as well as the eye coordination. Here, he knows that, say, because he has grown up from 8 to 12 months, we find considerable improvement. He is able to coordinate his body better. He moves his whole body to grasp and to turn to one side to another side. He is also able to understand that if an object is removed from him, it will be again coming back. This is known as object permanence. For example, if a small child is there, if you remove an object from him, he will lose his attention and he'll forget about it. But at the age of, say, 8 to 12 months, he knows that the object still exists. It is just removed from him. Say, later comes from the 12 to 18 months, there is increased growth. And here we see the tertiary circular motions where he knows here that there is cause and effect. Somebody has removed the ball or an object and therefore it has gone away. He is able to understand that objects are in relationship to people. He tries to understand whether he can roll a ball, squeeze a ball, or throw a ball, these sort of things. That is why the play stages, the objects or the toys that the children are given differ from age to age. Later, from 18 to 24 months, the child is able to understand that there are objects which he can say, I want a ball. He knows that the word ball means a particular object. Therefore, he is able to associate the symbols or words with objects. So he gradually tries to develop his vocabulary step by step. So when you try to see a child, we see a child passing through all these stages. That is, in the sensory motor stage, he's actually able to use his senses, motor actions. He's able to develop his hand, eye, and movement coordination. He's able to use his hands and legs. Gradually, he's able to get up. First, he sits and then he stands, and then he tries to seek attention whenever he is able to use small words, so he gets the attention. So here, the child is basically attention seeking, but he interacts with the environment. He is able to make certain Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is the first stage or the sensory motor stage where the child is able to develop certain learning. He's able to understand the environment and he's able to understand about the various stimuli of the environment, and his learning gradually improves. Now comes the pre-operational stage from 2 to 7 years, where the child's language increases vastly. He tries to develop new words. He learns new words. At the same time, he thinks he's important. He is the center of the world. This is known as egocentric view. The child thinks he is the central part of the earth and the world revolves around him. He is focused on himself. He also tries to pretend play. That is, he tries to play with objects. This is known as animism. That is, he tries to give feelings to objects. For example, he says, my toy is angry with me because I have not talked to him. My doll is crying. So these aspects of trying to what we call give feelings to the objects around him. That is known as, especially giving feelings to the objects around him is known as animism. He tries to develop these aspects. His rationality is somewhat limited. His logical thinking is also a little bit slow. That is, in the sense he's trying to develop here. And here we find here he tries to depend more on intuition, his inner feelings, and also he tries to have rational thinking is somewhat limited. He's not very logical in his thinking. For example, if you try to give him milk in a glass as well as a tumbler, but both are of the same volume, he's not able to distinguish. He's able to say that the tumbler has, because it is somewhat bigger, it has more milk than a smaller glass, which may have the same volume of milk. So he's not able to distinguish, he's not able to understand the size, the shape, concepts, and also he's in the process of learning here. And also he thinks in everything in terms of good or bad. There is either purely good things or purely bad things. He's not able to rationalize as such. And therefore, he's here in the process of the learning, the vocabulary is increasing, the imaginative nature of the child is increasing, he is creative. At the same time, his ability to actually, his or her ability to actually understand in a logical, rational manner is somewhat limited. Now comes the stage 3, that is the concrete operational stage, where the child from the age of 7 to 12 years, he is able to actually concretize the objects or the things around him. He understands, for example, now that the same quantity of milk may in a small glass may look somewhat more, whereas in a larger glass it may look somewhat small. Here he also understands the concept of size, shape, characteristics. He understands the scientific principles now better, and he knows that the water can be made into snow or ice, and the ice can be made again into water. He is able to understand that the objects can be transferred from one form to another, and this is known as the transitivity, and also the ability to arrange in the things in a sequential order, from that is the ascending order, descending order, or an increasing order, or placing the words in the context in a linear manner, or trying to understand the order in particular way, how numbers or figures can be placed. This is the time when there is a concrete aspects he can understand in a concrete manner all the learning. Here, the learning, for example, if he wants to organize vessels in a particular order from small to large, he's able to do it. So the concepts of volume, shape, size here, and also about some mathematical concepts is able, addition, subtraction, division, these he is able to understand. Now comes the later stage from 12 to adulthood, where the adolescent stage, I would call it. And here the individuals try to develop more rational thinking, more abstract thinking. That is, they can, whatever experiences they encounter, they try to see that there is some logic. They are more hypothetical, more imaginative, more creative. And if some vague information is given, they are able to make some sense out of it. For example, you give some disconnected words, they are able to make the meaning out of it by trying to use their imagination. Here, the concepts, mathematical concepts of higher level mathematics concepts, they are able to understand better. And therefore, here, something like equations or algebra, these sort of things, they are able to understand much better. Also, the scientific concepts, they are able to understand. So here, they are also able to understand the self-reflection is there, awareness is there, and also they are able to understand certain social aspects of relations. And this is how they gradually develop their learning ability, and their schemas become more enriched. They're able to understand more things. This development is continuous. That is, this exists even in the adulthood. This is a continuous aspect once where from the formal operational stage, here they are able to understand the world and actually interact with the world, and this continues up till the death of the individual. That is, this is a continuous process where they try to put in the new knowledge. So this phase is important in the sense that this developmental stage continues throughout his life. Now, when we actually try to evaluate Piaget's theory, his knowledge of schemas, assimilation, accommodation, and how we actually interact with the world and try to develop the knowledge have gained much appreciation. But he also talks about how the children, there is no going back, no regression, there is a continuous development, but we know that individuals are all not equal. Sometimes, although he has specifically said that the stage 1 sensory motor stage is from 0 to 2, and the pre-operational stage is from, say, 2 to 7 years, and the concrete operational stage is from 7 to 12 years, and the formal operational stage, these stage-wise things, sometimes they may overlap. For example, some children may be still in pre-operational stage, say the age of 8. So the individual differences exist. And sometimes, although the child may be around 13, 14 years, he may be still in concrete operational stage. So individual differences are based on genetics and also the individual characteristics, which are again based on hereditary and other features, other factors. So it is very difficult to say that these are the particular years within which the individual can develop. So there may be some interlapping, or sometimes some individuals may develop early and some a bit slow. But generally, these are the stages that Piaget says will actually develop the intellectual development amongst the children. He's also criticized because the order of stages sometimes may not be true. Sometimes it may go in a reverse manner. In all individuals, the age range may not be the same. The intellectual development may also, it may not be in the same manner. Sometimes it is very rigid. We know of individuals who sometimes develop after 18. So it is very difficult to say, because the individual innate potential takes in various factors while developing. And also there is this aspect of culture. Culture also makes a variance. Why? When we talk about the development of an individual, the different cultures treat the children in a different way, and also certain cultures help in the quicker development of the children. And whereas some cultures, they do not give much importance, and there is not much stimuli given for development or the intellectual development of the child. We also have this aspect of attention and memory. All children may not be attentive, or they do not have sufficient memory, and this also has a bearing on the on what we call the development of the learning. Therefore, Piaget's theory is also somewhat criticized for not being true to a great extent, but at the same time, it has gained lots of validation because it's one of the theories which is finding still lots of significance in the education or in the classrooms of our country or the worldwide. The next theory we'll be talking about is the moral development theory of Holberg. See, every individual, when he's a child, he is not developed morally. The moral aspect, we have talked about the sexual development or psychosexual development aspect and the social development aspect in how a child learns. But there is also this aspect of morality, what is good, what is bad. And here, the Holberg talks about the moral development and how moral reasoning actually develops in a child. He talks about 3 stages. One is pre-conventional, the next is conventional, and then the post-conventional stage. Pre-conventional stage is the first initial stages of moral grounding, or how a child develops his morality. Morals are essentials in the sense that how an individual lives or what actually he tries to give an input to the society depends on the morals. A person may be good for all purposes, but if his morals are somewhat degraded, then there is a possibility that he may affect the society to a certain extent. So the individual morals may also contribute to social integrity. So in this aspect, the Holberg tries to talk about the feeling that morality is also gradually develops, moral reasoning develops in individuals. And he talks about the pre-conventional stage where the child tries to develop morality. For example, when we consider small children, when we say, if you do wrong, we'll punish you, the child understands that something is wrong, and therefore, if he does that particular work, he'll be punished. Whereas, if he doesn't do what the parent asks him to do, that is what the parent refuses to ask him, or the parent says that he shouldn't do. If the child does not do, then he's safe. So obedience by itself is a reward for him, whereas a child will be rewarded, he'll be called a good boy, he'll be given some gift. So here the child is happy. So the obedience also has certain what we call reward to the children, whereas if he is not abiding what his parent asks, then he may be punished. Is somewhat bad for him, whereas obeying the parents gives him some gifts. These sort of aspects actually is the moral standard. So it is not very conventional in the sense here the morality of the child. Now, sometimes later, when a child is asked to do something good, here he becomes that there is some personal gain in it for him. That is, he engages in moral behavior because it brings him some reward. For example, if he asks to do some work, he says, what will I get out of it? So here, the morality is dependent on the individual aspect. He wants to gain something from it. This is known as the instrumental hedonism. Hedonism means pleasure. Instrumental means by doing something, you are able to get some pleasure. But pleasure is, if I do something, whether I would benefit or not. Then comes the conventional stage where if you are appreciated for something, you are called a good person for the namesake or for getting the name. Here you try to make some effort. That is, the morality is conditioned by seeking approval or appreciation from the other persons. This is because they would like to be accepted in the social world. For example, if somebody is, you find generally the teenagers at some stage, they try to fill in the societal expectations and they try to do what other parents or their friends or peers ask them to do because they would like to be appreciated. They would like to be called as a good boy. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then there is also, at the later stage, we find that they maintain the morality because we expect that the society expects us to do something, and therefore taking into consideration the societal laws or norms or what society expects to do, we try to fill in the societally determined roles. That is, we try to think that moral laws are necessary because when we try to morally oblige certain laws, we are able to, the society exists, or the society, to please society, we continue to follow certain societal laws. And the morality is dictated by society here. That is the appreciation of people to a large extent, and their perspective is somewhat gets validated. That is, if they do something, if the society appreciates it, they feel their work is validated, and the morality is conditioned by this. So here we see the conventional stage, the importance is given to social aspect of the social appreciation or the social circumstances with which the individuals are getting appreciated. The morality is subject here to the others' appreciation. Then next comes the last stage, or the pre-conventional, post-conventional stage, that is beyond the conventional stage, where here we try to get satisfaction by doing something. That is, we feel that what we think morality should also be in the public interest. It should be in the interest of other people, that there are certain norms which help the welfare of the society. And therefore, here the individual's view of morality is trying to be integrated with the morality of the society. So here we say that a person tries to give his morals based on the best way he can deal with a particular situation, and he voices his opinions very clearly. And even if it is against the law, he tries to moralize, saying it is to the best of the society. Here we talk about individual rights as well as democratically accepted, and also here his morality is somewhat being validated. He tries to give reason to his morality, taking the societal aspect into consideration. At the end comes the last stage, where he tries to think about his moral reasoning, which is the highest stage of moral reasoning here. He tries to say, that the universe has a particular way of dealing with morals. It's beyond nations, beyond things, beyond control, where there is a particular way of dealing with things. There's a perspective of right and wrong, which is societally accepted, which he feels is also correct. And here he develops that the feeling that the societally accepted norms and the morals of the individuals must be in tune. For example, here we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, where his individual feelings of right, wrong is somewhat appreciated by the world, and the world also it is in tune with the natural principles of non-violence, or trying to have social justice, etc. So here this is the highest level of moral development. So we talk about the pre-conventional stage where the child tries to obey its parents and develop their appreciation to conforming to social norms in the conventional stage, to having a sense of right or wrong and standing by what is correct or moral at the post-conventional stage. So an individual development of morality of what is right and what is wrong also varies across different stages. Holberg theory helps us to understand the moral dilemmas, because every individual at some point or other is faced with a dilemma of what to do, what is correct, what is socially acceptable, as well as what is individually nice. Because sometimes individuals' interest or morals may be in confrontation with the societal morals. So here the individual will try to be idealistic or theoretical in nature, but at the same time, what we find in our real lives and what is morally conscripted by the society may be at variance. This is why people have moral dilemmas, whether what I do is correct, is it moralistic from my point or from the societal point. So these moral dilemmas do exist, and Holberg talks about these dilemmas, but whatever he says is somewhat abstract and idealistic and theoretical in nature. And it is not that these stages go in a sequential manner. Sometimes we also regress back. So sometimes we think highly morally, but moral acting is different. Holberg has not taken this into consideration. But still, the Holberg's theory gives an idea of how morals evolve over a period of time in one's lifespan. And also, we try to give what you call a moralistic view to the children. For example, the children or adolescents, how they actually work in a society or how they act in a society is actually dependent on their moral thinking. So Holberg's theory is somewhat abstract and idealistic, but at the same time, here we are also saying that it is also gives a good understanding. But the problem with this theory is he has only considered only the male participants in his theory, but he has not considered any females in his experimentation. Has not done most of the experimentation on females, and therefore this is somewhat considered a negative thing, or he is criticized for it. And as I said, there can be regression. There can also some go backs, and sometimes a moralistic person may, again, he may not be, a highly moralistic person may only be dictated by the terms of society. There may be also regression. It may not be a unilinear, a standardized sort of thing where there is no return back. Sometimes they also come back and forth. So the moralistic theory, of course, gives an interpretation of how children develop their morality. So we have come across the 4 theories. They help actually for to understand the children's development in learning, development of morality, development of their social learning and social aspects, sociability. But at the same time, they also help us in trying to give us some counseling with regard to their learning or their what you call social vagaries, or how they actually behave in social conditions, able to predict, analyze, as well as give them some such certain suggestions which have what you call a bearing on their development. So these all theories actually cover all the different stages of the lifespan as well as of an individual. They also try to understand how gradually one person develops socially, physically, psychologically, and also intellectually. So we have they give a general idea of things. There are many other theories, but these theories have gained prominence. So we'll now talk about the next aspect, that is the factors influencing the development. When we talk about the different factors influencing development of an individual, as I said earlier, we have both the genetical as well as the environmental factors. We know that the genetics, or how the actually the hereditary factors get transferred from one generation to another, from parents to children. The genes are the bearers of this information, and therefore the children are able to, or from one generation to another, the children are able to get all these genetic inputs from their parents. We know in nature that every individual forms from a zygote, which is a fusion of the sperm cell with that of the female cell, that is the ovum. And we all know, the students from biology especially know, but for the benefit of the students who come in the arts faculties, I would like to tell that the zygote is a cell, a unified cell, which is formed due to the fusion of the sperm with that of the ovum. Sperm is the male cell and ovum is the female cell. And this sperm, all the human cells are made up of 23 pairs of chromosomes, and they actually, all our cells multiply by the process, a division known as mitosis. Therefore, when we talk about our hair cells or skin cells, they are multiplying always. And here, the number of chromosomes in every cell, that is the individual blocks with which the human beings are made, we are made up of cells. And every cell has about 46 chromosomes, whereas the sex cells of the gametes have only 23 chromosomes. That is, the 46 has become singled out. That is, they have actually been divided, and therefore we get the sex cells or gametes having only 23 cells by a special type of division known as meiosis. Whereas in our body, the cells develop by the process of mitosis, but in the reproductive cells, there is a special type of cell division where the sex chromosomes get halved. That is, instead of 46 chromosomes, you have got 23 chromosomes. So the sperm cell has 23 chromosomes and the ovum has 23 chromosomes. And when the fusion occurs, during copulation, now the 23 plus 23 becomes the 46 chromosomes, and therefore the zygote has 46 chromosomes, and it goes on multiplying several times, initially from the first to 3 months and to 4 months, and where we'll have a bunch of cells and the fetus is formed, and later on several organs get developed from the fetus, and that is how a zygote develops into a fetus, and a fetus develops into an individual. So here we talk about the sex determination. We talk about the 23 chromosomes in the male sperm cell as well as the 23 chromosomes in the female gamete, that is ovum. And these 23 in the ovum always have the sex chromosome as X, whereas in the male gamete, that is in the sperm cells, it may be either X or Y. So depending on the type of the fusion, if the female cell with X chromosome is combined with that of the sperm cell having the Y chromosome, XY combination results in the male progeny, whereas male child. Whereas if the X chromosomes of the mother mates with that of the sperm cell having the X chromosome, it becomes the female child. So the combination of X and X, that is one from the male, the other from the female, results in the female child. Whereas the combination of X and Y, that is Y from the sperm cell and X from the mother or from the ovum, results in the male child. So X's combination results in the female child and XY combination in the male child. Now this sex determination actually is important because originally the sperm cell has 23 and the female cell or the ovum has 23 chromosomes. Only one cell, that is one chromosome, has this X, and one other chromosome from the ovum has this X. And the female sperm cell may be having either X or Y. That is, the male cell may be having X or Y chromosome. The female cell will have only X chromosome. So the combination or the variation whether the sperm cell of X will combine with X will result in the female child. And if the sperm cell with Y chromosome combines with that of X chromosome of the female child, it becomes the female child. you can understand how the sex determination works. And here the genetic principles, the genes also will vary, and two genes of the similar type, that is one from parent mother and then another from the father, will try to develop a characteristic. So for example, the black eyes or the brown eyes are because of the chromosomes. One is obtained from the mother and the other is from the father. We talk about also the concept of dominance and recessiveness, where one gene from mother may be dominant or one gene from the father, and depending on it, whatever is the dominant gene, it may predominate and it may be shown in the characteristic. So whatever gene constitution is there in the child or an individual, it is known as the genotype. And what character is visible outside, like hair color, eye color, that is known as the phenotype. Depending on the dominant genes, you may find that certain traits are expressed and certain traits are not expressed, that they are remaining dormant, and therefore they're known as the recessive genes. Now, this importance is given because the nature of the sexuality of the child is dependent on the father. For example, the sperm may be X or Y, but always it is the X chromosome that is seen in the mother or in the ovum. Therefore, it is the father who actually determines the sex of the child. Now here, the chromosomal abnormalities are also seen most of the time. That is, the genes, however they are constituted, they are physically or they are phenotypically shown in the environment when a child is born. And therefore, when there are abnormalities in the genes or chromosomes, automatically there are also defects seen in the individuals who are born. And therefore, we find that certain individuals show some variations. And that is why we find some people having characteristically somewhat different features, which are because of chromosomes. For example, if you have an extra copy of chromosome, then that is known as the Down syndrome. This is because the 21st chromosome, instead of having one, there are two, what we call an extra chromosome is seen, an extra copy. So here we have normal 23 chromosomes, and the 21st chromosome, we have a double copy, which totally results in 24 number of chromosomes, again giving problems to the individual. And when a child is born here with Down syndrome, we'll see he has a round face, his skull is different, attenuated, and also an extra fold of skin is seen over the eyelids, and his mental abilities are also somewhat low. Also, we talk about Klinefelter syndrome, in which a male inherits an extra pair of the Y chromosome, and therefore we have XYY chromosomes, which actually again will have some problems in the development of the individual. And we see that there are enlarged breasts, they are very tall in stature, and they have the male genitalia is not properly developed. So depending on the chromosomes, whether there is an extra piece or whether there is an extra chromosome or whether there is an extra or a less chromosome, we have various conditions also called as different syndromes can be seen. Turner syndrome is one in which there's an extra X chromosome is missing or seen in only parts. Again, this will give to lots of problems. Again, like problems in infertility, problems of reasoning. So whatever is seen here in the differences in the sexuality are seen, as well as in the development of the brain or reasoning or seen. So whenever there is an abnormal child, it is also possible that the chromosomal deficiencies or chromosomal extra chromosomes may be present, giving rise to various problems. Also, there are certain genetic disorders which are there because there are some biochemical factors which actually a lack of a gene or the presence of a gene, somewhat an abnormality from the normal thing may cause certain problems. For example, we find that the phenyl metabolism in the body, it will create problems. The children will be having mental retardation. This is because the phenyl ketones are produced in the body. There is no enzyme to actually process them. The enzyme is created by the genes. Because there is no enzymes, we find the ketones seen in the urine. And therefore, again, this is a problematic. So there are biochemical reactions initiated by the genes. And if there are certain problems in the genetical disorders, there are certain problems in the genes or there are genetical disorders, we find that there are individually, there are certain problems leading to hyperactivity of the individuals or somewhat mental retardation of the children, etc. Similarly, we have another major disorder called as sickle cell anemia, where the blood cells are not properly formed. This is because of the lack of certain enzymes, which are again because there are problems in the genes. The genes are actually produces these proteins, and therefore, when there is a problem in a gene, we find automatically the RBC or the red blood cells are not properly produced. Because the RBC is not produced, the child is not able to take in oxygen, which will create certain problems. Therefore, the child actually dies early, or he has to be given RBC continuously. So these sort of problems, also known as cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, where the child actually bleeds to death, and also spina bifida. And there are certain disorders. That is, here the spine is somewhat has a disorder. And also we have Tay-Sachs disease, Huntington's disease. They're all genetically given, and they are sometimes male dominant, or they may be female dominant, that may be passed on from one generation to another generation through females, but the male child may get it. So there are different patterns of sequences through which these genes are given, are transmitted from one generation to another, leading to certain disorders. And basically, the problem with most of these disorders are because of there are changes in the genes, or in the what we call hereditary, how we get the genes, as well as the changes in the genetical structures of the individuals. Also, there are certain problems caused because of the changes in the brain chemistry. For example, we know that different chemicals are produced in the brain. Serotonin is one such chemical which actually tries to give you happiness, as well as it helps you to wake up, your body sleep, and eating behavior. So because it gives happiness, you try to eat something. So the serotonin is one such hormone. So there are several such hormones in the body which are produced continuously. They are known as neurotransmitters. They try to they'll be coming from the brain, but they try to influence the whole body, the whole neurons. They try to affect. They are transmitted through the neurons, all these chemicals, and their production also will vary in different individuals. And because of their different chemicals being produced in the body, the interaction in the body will also try to influence the metabolism and different psychological and physical functions. And therefore, if there are variations in the brain chemistry, automatically they also will try to be affecting your body. Next comes the hormones. Hormones are produced in smaller quantities from the brain, and from the pituitary gland, they are produced in the brain, and they try to influence the growth and development of an individual. For example, the pituitary gland produces the growth hormone, and this growth hormone tries to develop the whole individual, that is the structure of the brain, bones, muscles, and how an individual grows across the different stages. The pituitary gland is one of the major gland, which also tries to control other glands in the body. And these hormones are minute chemical substances which travel across the bloodstream and are able to affect the metabolism of the body. For example, the insulin produced by our livers, or for example, the adrenal gland produces substances like epinephrine, norepinephrine. And these are the different substances which are produced throughout the body in different glands. Thyroid gland produces thyroxine, and this also influences the metabolism. The epinephrine and norepinephrine produced by the adrenal gland, which is near the kidney. This is a small gland. Now, this is the thing also known as flight or fight hormone, the epinephrine, because if you are placed in a precarious position or in a dangerous position, you want either to run away from there or try to fight there. So this is known as the fight or flight hormone. So there are various substances produced in the body, these hormones, which also try to develop during different stages of the individual. When an individual grows, the hormonal quantity also varies. And also we find that the testosterone hormone is seen both in females as males, but males it is more in quantity. And also the females have their own special hormones known as the progesterone and estrogen. Cortisol is one hormone which is produced when there is stress in individuals. So these different hormones also have a bearing on how an individual acts. Now, we talk about the psychosocial factors. For example, when a particular event or condition is influenced, so we find the individual is also influenced by his environment. There are certain things which actually help the child to develop properly. The environment is one such thing. The environment develops an individual. Any events or circumstances which are beyond the individual and which tries to influence the individual development is known as his environment. But sometimes what happens, the embryonic development or the children's development may be curtailed, it may be slowed down because of certain factors. That's why we say that the pregnant women must take care of their children or their fetus in their particular manner, because they have to be very safe and they have to be careful. This is because that what they get exposed to also determines the developmental stage of the child. For example, there are certain drugs which actually influence the mother. For example, if the alcohol, smoking, and drugs like aspirin can have an effect of the children's growth. Sometimes certain vaccines, like for German measles, may also affect the children's development. So what sort of drugs they are exposed to, the mother is exposed to, will determine. There may be certain stimulants or narcotics or hallucinogens which actually may come in the way of the development of the child. Sometimes there are factors like RH factors which actually come in the development of the child. It may become a hurdle actually for the development of the child. For example, the father may be having an RH factor which may be positive. RH is a particular type of protein or antigen. It may be present in father, but it may not be present in the mother. And because of the sperm, because it is present in the sperm, it is possible it may develop certain antibodies in the mother, which may actually try to reduce the span of the child, that is the fetus in the mother's body. That is, the antigen present in the sperm may form antibodies, and these antibodies may react against the fetus, and therefore it may gradually bring the death of the fetus. Therefore, it happens only if one has RH positive and the other has RH negative, especially the mother has the RH negative. So therefore, the blood typing is also important when there is marriages. That is when marriage counseling is required to see the incompatible blood types. Sometimes there are maternal diseases. As I was talking earlier, rubella or German measles during pregnancy also tries to harm the fetus. It brings what we call blindness, deafness, and also mental defects. Sometimes there are sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis or what we call gonorrhea, and these sort of diseases also bring blindness to the children. There are several negative aspects seen in the child. For example, in the growth of the child, we find that there are abnormalities of brain development. Alcohol, tobacco smoking, these are certain drugs also which influence the fetal development. Now, beyond these drugs and also the incompatible blood types, we also have the maternal diseases, which actually the mother tries to give to the child. This is because the herpes, syphilis, which the mother may have caught from the other parent, or due to the environment, or due to exposure, or due to certain sexual practices, these sort of sexually transmitted diseases may also cause abnormalities to the child. There are certain other environmental factors. For example, the air pollution, the lead poisoning, and other things which actually can have a bearing on the growth of the child. Now, there is another concept known as the maternal age, at which age the mother gradually has is at the childbearing age. Generally, the childbearing age for the mothers is from 18 to 35. So if the mother is somewhat younger, very younger, then there's where she's not fully developed, or at a stage after 35, where there is not much production of the hormones, there is a possibility that the mother may not be giving rise to a healthy child. So the healthy ovum is one of the features which a mother should have to have a good child. That is, the fetal development also depends on the age of the mother. Maternal malnutrition is one more aspect. We know that the mother should have adequate nutrients while growing up. Otherwise, if she is not properly fed, it happens sometimes that then in such cases, the child will also not get sufficient nutrition, and this will have lifelong implications for the child. Therefore, the mother is given supplements too, like folic acid or vitamin Bs and other vitamins, which actually helps the mother to grow. So being subject to infections or being subject to malnutrition are some of the things which actually become what we call a hazard to the child. Maternal stress is another aspect. The stress of the mother, she should be more relaxed. Depression is also, mother's depression is also linked to the abnormal development in the child, and also preterm birth. That is, they are born before their due time. The paternal factors, the parent, the father's age, nutrition, his lifestyle, and attitude also influence the child. Because if the father is an alcoholic, or if he is exposed to radiation, or is also expected to petrochemicals or phytochemicals or certain pesticides, there's a possibility that there will be abnormalities in sperm, which again will reflect in an unhealthy fetus. Smoking habit of the father can also be a problematic, because although not directly, there is passive smoking. The mother also smokes, in the sense it is not direct, but she actively inhales the breath of the father, and therefore the smoke goes into her lungs, and it also affects the development of the fetus. What sort of care we take before birth and what sort of care we take after birth also has a bearing. For example, the type of birth, how the mother tries to seek birth in the hospitals is also important. One of the famous methods is the Lamaze method, where mother is given the education about how the childbirth occurs. She is made acquainted with all the knowledge about the anatomy and the birth process, and she is able to deliver in a normal way. That is found to be healthy. But then there is also cesarean deliveries, where the mother's uterus is actually given a surgical treatment, and the mother's uterus is opened out, and the child born is supported then. Now, here we also find certain times the birth conditions, how they give birth, may also lead to certain strain in the child, leading to anoxia or less of oxygen, which may have lifelong implications. Sometimes the shortage of oxygen to the baby would lead to brain damage or cerebral palsy or mental retardation, depending on the severity of the condition. So how a pregnant woman is taken care of, to what sort of environment she's exposed, to what sort of nutrients she's given, what sort of mental stress or relief she has, all these have a bearing on the child's growth. Sometimes after the childbirth, we have the postnatal, that is immediately after birth, the mother and the child should be taken care of. And here, the mother as well as the child require adjustment to the environment. They require the physical adjustment, they require support, they also require the postnatal care. The postnatal care is after the mother, and sometimes there are emotional and psychological adjustments that have to be taken care of. The mother is maybe sometimes depressed. This is known as the postpartum depression, that is after birth. The mother feels she has a sadness, anxiety, or despair, or their own trustworthiness or their worthiness or social acceptance. These may be sometimes, maybe if it is continued, it may go for a lifelong, or it may go for a somewhat more time, the depression may continue. So these things have to be treated immediately. They have to be given support by the family members as well as their partners. Now, there are also other factors influencing development. See, the fetal development is one aspect, but once the child is born, there are different spans of development. So when the child is born and later when he grows up, whether they are abused or not, whether they are given encouragement or not, or whether the parents are able to take proper care of them or not, whether their parents are divorced or not, whether they're subjected to accidents or illnesses, all these have a bearing on how a child tries to understand the world around him. Also, we have got the parenting style, the socioeconomic status, and also how attached we are to our children, and the socialization process, whether we have become sociable or we are not aloof from others, the schooling process, the neighborhood process, what religions we try to accept, what religions we abide by, and our culture, our languages, our life experiences, and other people to whom we are exposed to, our acquaintances, the things we read, see, all these have an influence on the development of an individual. Now, we can also talk somewhat simply about the aspect of nature versus nurture. There is this concept that genetics have a more bearing on the development of a child. For example, it is seen that when there are fraternal twins, the fraternal twins are twins who have been conceived because of being two sperms actually are trying fertilizing two ovum, then you have got the fraternal twins, whereas the identical twins come because the zygote which has been fertilized at initial stage tries to divide into two and develops into two individuals, two fetus. Two fetus develop into two individuals. So identical twins come from the same zygote, and we see that their characteristics of identical twins are somewhat similar in nature than that of fraternal twins, leading to the conclusion that the heredity also has a bearing on the development of an individual. We find that the identical twins who come from the same zygote have the same type of characteristics. This is one aspect which gives what we call strength to the idea that the identical twins or heredity has a bearing on the person's individual development. But sometimes we find that the individuals who are placed in identical environments try to develop in the similar manner. For example, if we try to consider two younger children or infants who are placed at two different locations, if they are from the same socioeconomic background, but they're placed in a different socioeconomic levels, we find that their upbringing or environment also has an influence on the child. So this nature versus nurture, what you call controversy is seen very much. We have a number of films where we see the Tarzan trying to grow up in the jungles. He behaves like an animal. So whether there is a, what we call the behavioral genetics tries to deal with these things, and how a person develops his behavior depends both on the genetic makeup to a great extent, also the environmental to a certain extent. Therefore, here we have psychologists and sociologists talking about the environment. More actually now the concept is the genetic variation with individuals does exist, but that it is very little. That is to the extent of not 1%. Therefore, it is the environment which will try to actually try to improve the environment of the child so that he is able to use his full potential and develop totally. So we have sometimes between the siblings a shared environment, the same family background, the same things. This is known as the shared environment. That is, siblings from the same parents, they share the same culture, same religion, they are subjected to the same parental attitudes, and these sort of things will actually try to have the same developmental patterns. This is the same shared experiences will try to give rise to same type of development of individuals. Whereas non-shared environments, even the siblings, when they are exposed to different schools, different neighborhoods, different experiences, different parental attitudes, they also give rise to non-shared experiences. Non-shared environmental experiences will try to give rise to the individual differences. Therefore, whatever variation we see in human beings, whatever number of persons we see, the individuals varying in their intelligence or morality or in their experiences, the differences in individuals, in their habits, in their morals, this is because they are being subjected to different environments. Of course, the contribution of genetics is there. At the same time, their exposure to environment is also there. Therefore, nowadays, the idea is by giving the similar types of environment or trying to give an encouraging environment or the environment which is conducive to the growth of the child, it is possible to develop individuals to the greatest extent possible, because after all, human life is the what we call as from the epigenetic principle is a gradual unfolding of the child. So with this, we have talked today about the Piaget's developmental theory of learning. Cognitive development, it is known as cognitive theory. And we have talked also about the Holberg's theory of moral development, where we talked about the conventional, pre-conventional, and the post-conventional types of development of morality. And we talked about the genetical aspects of development. There are various features, how development actually occurs, right from the stage of fetus, how actually we have got the zygote being formed from the male and female, and how the XY is called as the male, the XY chromosome combination, whereas the XX chromosome combination is called the female. All the females have in the one type of chromosomal setup, that is XX female gametes in their ovum. That is only one type of X chromosome is seen, whereas the males have two types of sperms, one with X and another Y, depending on the combination of X sperm of male with that of the X of female, we have the female child, whereas the Y sperm of the Y chromosome sperm may combine with the X of the female to give the male child. And this is the genetic basis or how the sex is determined, and based on the sex, there is actually the chromosomes, if they are proper, if they are derived in a proper manner, if they are inherited properly, it is okay. Otherwise, there's a normal growth. Otherwise, we find if there are differences, if there are multiple chromosomes, multiple sex chromosomes, we have variations, again giving rise to several problems of growth. Extra chromosomes or less chromosomes or disintegrated chromosomes can lead to a number of deformities. We talked about the postnatal and prenatal environment and how different types of environmental circumstances may influence the child, and mother's nutrition, mother's growth, mother's age, all have a bearing on the child development, and how the behavioral genetics or how individuals are different is dependent because of both their heredity as well as environment. And there is something like environment in individuals which they share with their siblings. It may be shared experiences. Sometimes even two people from different homes may come to a same school and they may have shared experience and they may have similar attitudes, whereas from the same family they have non-shared environments too. So an individual, how he develops, and the individual differences we see in the world are because of the differences in both the genetics as well as the hereditary factors. With this, I conclude my today's lesson.
Ma'am, it was a wonderful explanation. Ma'am, a small request from our end, ma'am. They have scheduled the classes on 13th, 19th, and 20th. But during these three dates, we also have exams, ma'am.
Okay.
Fourth semester exams. So we won't be able to attend these three classes, ma'am. Can you reschedule these classes, please?
As far as I know, the rescheduling is not possible. But talking to the authorities, maybe we can try to record it and keep it for your benefit.
But we will be in the examination hall actually writing the exam during these scheduled classes.
I understand, but then I am not the authority to reschedule.
I know, ma'am.
At the same time, there is a possibility that they may go in what we call combination with exams. We try to look at this as different aspects. So, for example, you are in now which semester?
Right now, we'll be writing a fourth semester exams, ma'am.
So we try to look at it as a tandem. That is, writing fourth semester should not be influenced by the fifth semester. But I understand your doubt. But I may bring your thought to the higher authorities. But I think these classes are scheduled because these people have exams. That is fifth semester exams are due soon. So I think the best solution would be to have a recording and to be placed at your convenience. But then I would try to bring your what you call
ma'am, it's a humble request because these three classes will be our last classes, and if we have to ask any doubts also, we can only verify during these last three classes. And if we are writing the examinations, then we won't be able to seek your help or guidance if we have any doubts. So we humbly request, ma'am, if it's possible, could you kindly schedule it some other days, ma'am, after the exams probably, which is much more convenient for everyone.
I'll bring your concern to the higher authorities.
Thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Good day.
Thank you. Good day.